In a 1990 interview, Yngwie Malmsteen said it was almost impossible to work with ex-Rainbow vocalist Joe Lynn Turner. A very negative guy, he says. Great singer, but not for my music. He used to say things behind my back. A lot of backstabbing. So painful to deal with. According to Yngwie, that's why he fired Joe. Together, they recorded the Odyssey album as well as a live release, Trial by Fire, live in Leningrad from 1989. These records were released by Polydor Polygram Record Company. And by the way, the only thing that was live on the Leningrad concert was the drums. The rest of it was all dubbed after that. The keyboardist Jens confirms this fact. At that point, Joe Lynn Turner rejoined Ritchie Blackmore and Deep Purple. Yngwie said he didn't like it. Deep Purple, it's Ian Gillan. No one can replace him, and now it's Rainbow again? And he says, I'd love to hear him sing Child in Time, and Yngwie laughs. Let me remind you guys that the album Odyssey was commercially the most successful album in Yngwie's catalog. They sold about 500,000 copies. Malmsteen complained that the record company didn't promote his albums in the U.S. properly. Instead, they promoted Bon Jovi and Def Leppard. According to Yngwie, he gave them potentially gold and platinum records, and they just threw it in the bin. So, Yngwie wasn't happy with Joe Lynn Turner and Polygram Records. Actually, his songs Judas, Devil in Disguise, and See You in Hell, Don't Be Late were about Polygram and Yngwie's old managers and his frustration in them. Now let's find out Joe Lynn Turner's side of the story. This is what he revealed in interviews. Jim Lewis from Polygram called me up. He goes, look, I have a great guitar player, but he doesn't write songs. I said, what do you want me to do? And he goes, do the same thing you did with Rainbow and write the songs. He needs content. And I said, okay. Jim knew I had the songwriting abilities and all, said Joe. So he flew out to California and met Yngwie. And Yngwie was like a train wreck. According to Joe, Yngwie was young, super gifted, but at the same time, he was very arrogant and guarded. Anyway, Joe had worked with Ritchie Blackmore and knew how to deal with it. So he got a whip and a chair like a lion tamer, and he went into the cage. And Joe used his psychology to convince Yngwie to work together. So they spent 3 or 4 days of nonstop heavy partying, and Yngwie was like, yep, you're okay. I like you. Then Joe went back to New York to get some clothes and pack some stuff. And when he came back, Yngwie was in the hospital from a car accident. So instead of abandoning ship, Joe stayed in L.A. to help Yngwie. He was also the senior person because the Johansson brothers could barely speak English. Joe had to take care of all the bills and the doctors and everything else. So Joe says, I was the one taking care of him in the hospital. I was getting wire transfers of $80,000 from Polygram to keep him in a intensive care unit to save his life. Otherwise, they were going to send him down to the county hospital. On top of that, he had a manager who spoke in the third person, had a Rolls Royce, and carried around cocaine and a .44 Magnum. According to Joe Lynn Turner, he wrote not only the lyrics, but also the vocal melodies in Odyssey. I had all the demo tracks. While he was laid up in the hospital, I was writing lyrics and the melodies to all these tracks, Joe says. However, Yngwie claims that he always writes everything by himself, including the lyrics and vocal melodies. So this is what Yngwie says. I'm very comfortable singing myself, first of all. Secondly, there's a certain disconnect when you write the song and you have someone else to sing it for you. And it's kind of like a fakeness about it. I always wrote everything. I wrote all the lyrics. I wrote all the melodies, everything. It's just somebody else sung it. And to me, the singer is nothing else than a different like a bass player or keyboard player. They're not more important than any other musician. And they, unfortunately, seem to think that they are. And I've kind of had it with their sort of, self absorbed sort of way. And I'm very much against it. No, I don't like it. I don't like any of those people. And I don't like to do anything with them ever again. And here is what Joe Lynn Turner thinks of his working relationship with Yngwie. He's a control freak. So, to make a long story short, he just never has had changed or grown from that, I think. And I just pushed through. I'd already dealt with Richie's difficulties, shall we say, and I was pretty seasoned. So, I knew how to get around some of those things. And the way to get around it is to prove yourself and to write great songs on top of his wonderful tracks. So, when it all came to fruition, he couldn't deny it. And then after the record, he started denying things. He started saying that he was writing all the material, which is obviously ridiculous, because anybody can hear that it is me. So it was kind of strange and weird, but this record speaks volumes. Well, if we listen to the main hit song, Heaven Tonight from Odyssey, the vocal melody does sound like a Rainbow song, or the song Hold On. So evidently, Joe Lynn Turner speaks the truth. He did great vocals on top of Yngwie Malmsteen's beautiful tracks. When asked why he thinks Yngwie made such a statement about the singers he had worked with in the past, Joe explained, "It's a good question, because it's very obvious that in order to, by saying what he said, which is totally rubbish, really, I mean, come on. You have to be making a point for something to, and aggrandizing his own self. That's why he is singing. And he's got a terrible voice. So, what's the point of saying that when he really benefited by all the singers? The fact of Insecurity is that when you need to say something like that, you're trying to justify something that really does not exist, which means that you're weak in some department, in some area, where you try to say, it would be like me saying I didn't need all these guitar players. Are you kidding? What are you saying? It's a team, and there's no I in team. So, after the fact, he says he doesn't need these singers and that we're all self absorbed, which is absolutely ridiculous coming from him. There is no one more self absorbed than Yngwie Malmsteen. No one. So, the whole statement is ridiculous, and you don't strike out at these vocalists in the manner unless you are insecure or something. On Yngwie's vocals live and his backing band, Joe commented, Yngwie has gone off into another world. He does Rising Force and a few other songs, but he's singing them, and it's just not going to work. Sometimes you're influenced by the people around you. I'm not going to mention names, and it's a shame because you need guidance not only from yourself, of course, your interior, but you need an external guidance too from people whom you trust and admire and whom you can believe in. And I don't think he's getting the right information. He pushed the band over to the side and he's got 15 to 20 amps and he's in center stage and he's trying to sing. And I go, what is that? It doesn't work. And I think for me as a fan, Yngwie, I think he's a brilliant guitar player. It's just not working anymore. He's gone into a weird direction here. You can't tell people sometimes, though. What are you going to do? Well, Joe's right because almost every fan noticed that Yngwie's current stage setup looked weird. I've seen it. I've been there. But on the other hand, these days, when there's a lot of problems, Yngwie cannot afford a super awesome band. The 80s and 90s are long gone. Well, anyway, Joe Lynn Turner loves the album Odyssey he did with Yngwie, and he believes it's one of his best records. Here's what he thinks. I think it's some of the best work Yngwie or I have ever done. I think it's a brilliant album. It still stands the test of time. Odyssey is just powerful. Every track is a great song, yet incredible virtuoso playing by Yngwie. My vocal performances? I couldn't get better if I tried. The writing, everything was just there in that package. I know for a fact, numerically, it's the biggest album he's ever had. It was still aggressive and brilliant music and very accessible, or commercial, as you would say. We had a huge hit with Heaven Tonight, and it actually launched Yngwie's career. I thought we did our best work together on that record. It's a brilliant record. It still stands up to this day. I think it's his best work and some of mine as well.